Creating conversation. That's what we do on arrow.net. ARROE.net. All right, let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 152 is with Ty Longworth from the podcast Whiskeylodeon.
Good morning, good sir. How are you?
Wow, listen to the energy of that voice. What's going on there, man?
Just work. But
just work. Man, just work. I just got to do something. I'm going to call it work. So you are building a podcast. You've got to tell me how you're doing this. And the reason why is because I host a podcast called Pod Crashing, which is all about retraining the mind of those that really want to do a podcast, but they're not releasing a great podcast. What are you up to, mister?
So we are releasing a podcast called Whiskeylodeon. It is a drunk Nickelodeon recap podcast.
And what does it deal with?
We basically, my co-host and I, we are watching episodes of different Nickelodeon shows, starting with the 90s, recapping them while drinking, and just having a great time.
So the deeper you get into the podcast, the more alcohol you've had.
Yes, this is the goal.
How do you plan out a show like this? Because, I mean, a lot of people, like to go in there and they like to write it all out, because podcasting actually started with bloggers having a place to place their voice. And so how do you let this one grow?
So as far as putting together the episodes, we typically have a theme. So for our pilot episode, we are actually viewing pilot episodes of Rugrats and
Really?
Are You Afraid of the Dark? Really, we will already watch this ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So we will have notes, but then we're having a conversation. We are laughing. We are joking. We are commenting on how emotionally absent fathers were in the 90s, as at least portrayed in television.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because being an essential worker, being over there at HT, one of the things that I have taken note of, and I've talked about on my own podcast, CTCS, is the fact that when you say the fathers weren't really there, they are there today. It's like a complete evolutional change.
It's a welcome change at that.
I agree with you on that thought. What do you think? Do you think it's because of shows like this that opened up fathers' hearts and stuff? What happened here?
I don't think it was Rugrats that made fathers be like, I should be better. I think the dynamic has changed. I think women have become more empowered, mm-hmm. and men have, quite frankly, been used to mediocrity that now they have to step up just to match.
But that's what I love about having conversations like we're having here, because so many times, my father would have never taken me to the grocery store. He would have never done that. But I love the idea that that's happening today.
My dad never took me, I never cooked with my dad. I always had to cook with myself or with my mom.
Yeah.
I have a little boy now. He's almost 4, and he cooks with me.
I love it. I love it. Now, is he watching the episodes with you, or is this like, no, this is Dad's time? I'm going to have to make this podcast all about my private time over here in the studio.
I typically watch with my co-host Sean. Mm-hmm. So I tried to show my kid some episodes, and sometimes he's into it. Currently, his thing is on Nickelodeon. He likes to watch Paw Patrol. So maybe at some point we will cover that and just be like, hey, let's talk about what our kids are watching now. But I do enjoy these conversations. So we actually have an episode that we will be recording in a couple weeks, where we actually have a child psychologist reacting with us on how psychologists, and child psychologists in particular, are portrayed on these Nickelodeon shows.
See, that's taking the show in depth. And that's what I love about podcasting, is that you can have an idea, but it's so amazing to watch that idea grow and to physically blossom.
Yes. I also love the community aspect.
Yep.
So one of the things we are wanting to do is to create a Patreon, in which case those that join can be part of a Discord community, in which case they can then help us recommend shows and episodes that we should watch.
Let's talk about that. Because so many people think that you have to have the advertising in order to make the money on the podcast. I totally agree with that because I come from the world of radio. But when it comes to charging listeners, because I've just jumped on that and I charge the least amount of money that I can. And the reason why is because I feel so guilty of it being in that moment where the listener is going, I have to pay for this? My God, I get music for free. And I'm one of those people that gets music for free because I love Alexa.
So we will absolutely have this available for free. Mm-hmm. But at that point, we would then have ads. We would then have affiliate marketing. So what we would be offering is hey, if you want to skip the ads,
pay the money,
as well as have extra content, we have this Patreon community. You can help support us.
Yeah.
So with Patreon, with making money in general, there is a taboo with trying to get money from other people.
Right.
And so with Patreon, you are wanting to provide an extra service, or you're wanting to provide something more to be hey, it's not just we're asking you for money, we are providing something extra.
Yeah.
So in our minds, not only are we providing this Discord community, which a community is a great thing to be a part of, we are also offering an additional episode. We'll have additional content. They'll be able to have creative input, so they'll get to help us pick out these different episodes, different topics, different shows. And we're probably even going to do an extra recap podcast of just, hey, you guys get to pick what show, and we'll just go through the whole season. So we want to provide something extra that makes it worth it, not just, hey, can you please give us money? We want something that is worth it to them. Right.
And the way that I work mine is that you get the conversation right here, right now, and you get it as it is right now. And what's so amazing about that is that listeners accept the realness of a conversation. And when you go back and you edit it and you clean it up and stuff like that, I think a listener can sit there and figure out that this is not the way it really went. They've cleaned this up.
Right. But then you can also offer it early, so you can offer it a week in advance before everyone else does.
It sure does. Sometimes it's up to a month in advance before I get to it.
So absolutely. I mean, it's just you're wanting to provide an extra service that makes it worth it.
Now on Whiskeylodeon, are you going to talk about the whiskeys? Because I'll tell you what talk about a great way to get sponsorships where you give someone the plug and then the people that you're drinking buy advertising on your show.
We absolutely are talking about what we're drinking. So we are ranging between just whiskey on the rocks or neat or even a cocktail. So our pilot episode, we did what was called a chai toddy. So it was basically a chai latte with a shot of, and we were using a Henry McKenna sour mash bourbon or sour mash whiskey to go into it. And it was freaking delicious.
Are you running into any situations at the ABC store? And those that are listening, ABC store is the only place where you can buy alcohol here in the South, and so or in Charlotte or the Carolinas.
In North Carolina, South Carolina doesn't have that.
So, and plus South Carolina, you can buy alcohol on Sundays now. I mean, those places are open.
Yeah, they had that brunch bill that just came out. Fun fact, and this is actually something we've incorporated in our show as well. We like to share fun facts about the shows we're watching. Yeah. North Carolina was the last state to end prohibition 2 years after it was struck from the federal constitution.
Wow.
And the only reason why is because people in North Carolina were either going to Virginia or South Carolina to buy alcohol, and they were missing out on the taxes.
That's it. Which I totally believe is going to help change what's going on in North Carolina now, because now that the borderline is, going south of the border to South Carolina on Sundays is wide open, they're losing out on a ton of money.
Absolutely.
Which I think is going to be the way that they're going to go when it comes to legalizing pot, because in North Carolina, somehow, some way is going to say we've got to keep our hands in it so that we get the volume of money coming in. But how are we going to do that? So I keep waiting for ABC stores to have an ABC pot.
I think they'll probably have a different committee for that.
Yeah.
But agree. Yeah. Once they realize, we can actually make money off it, that's when they'll make it legal, which, morally speaking, is a dumb reason to make it legal. It should have been legal for medicinal purposes way in advance, but I digress.
So now on your podcast, is there an alcohol limit? Do you go until you pass out, or do you say, okay, we're only going to go until, until people know that we're going, we're kind of slurring away. Because I'm not going to lie to you. I've done interviews at 7, 8 o'clock at night after I've had a few vodka shots. And man, I'll tell you what, and I can go in there and listen to it and go, dude, you're kind of slurring a bit here.
So the goal is not to pass out on the podcast. But we plan on having 2 to 3 drinks. Mm-hmm. So that way, we get a good buzz, but it's never going to be excessive. Unless Liquid IV, and if you listen to this Liquid IV, we'd love to have you sponsor us, wants to provide us with Liquid IV to help us stay hydrated. I'm trying not to get ourselves alcohol poisoning.
But I have to know, did you loosen up when you took that third shot? I mean, is this about getting, kind of shit-faced or anything like that?
I'm a pretty loose person in general. And I think the fact that my co-host has been a friend of mine for almost a decade, that it was very natural. Fun fact, we were recording, or thought we were recording, for about 15 minutes before we realized it was not recording.
Oh, you're kidding me. Oh, my God. I have had that situation. Oh, my God. And you have to build up a ritual that you have to make sure that you turn on that record button, because it's so easy to go into a conversation and you forgot to hit record.
Well, we did hit record. It just didn't hit for some reason.
Oh, what equipment are you using?
So I'm not the equipment guy. So we were actually, we have a friend who runs, I think it's called Screwball TV. It's a sketch show.
Okay.
But anyway, so he has a co-work space that had a podcast studio that we were able to use while we were building ours.
Okay.
So we have some beautiful microphones. Like I said, I'm not the equipment guy, the technical guy. That would be my co-host, Sean.
Will you take the show out on the road in any way? And the reason why I bring that up is because I have the L8, which is from Zoom, and I love going into locations. For instance, yesterday when we were talking with Joe Piazza, she's got a new podcast which is based on introducing people to other podcasts and stuff like Pod Crashing. But I took it to the school where the students could ask the questions themselves. So
eventually we will want to take it on the road and treat it like a show. So we could go to like a place like the Comedy Zone, in which case then people can actually watch the episodes with us as we react live. Or we just recap it with them and they get to ask questions, Q&A. We just make it fun. We also want to start also bringing in some special guests. So we have currently some comedians lined up to be a special guest, but we also want to talk to some of the creators, writers, voice actors of these shows that we grew up to love. So we just kind of want to make something that's fun, but also like nostalgic.
How do you reach out there to those people? Is it a letter to them via, you DM them? Do you sit there and physically write them a letter? How do you get in? By getting in touch with their promoters? What do you do?
So currently the people I've been reaching out are people that I've already had a connection with.
Right.
So for the listeners, I actually met you through the Comedy Zone. And so a lot of the comics that came through, I became friends with.
Wow, you actually had friends? You of all people? Oh my God.
No. It's amazing what happens when you can be a fun hang.
Now, with the show called Whiskeylodeon and with you, taking, kind of going back and reviewing these shows and stuff like that, is Nickelodeon going to come knocking on your door saying, knock it the hell off?
I sure hope not.
Okay. Because
we would be driving people to Paramount Plus to rewatch some of these shows if they wanted to.
I'm with you on that, because that's part of the cross-pollination, and that's what I've always loved about podcasting, is the fact that this community of podcasters, whatever you're podcasting, we are all a family, whereas in radio, it's all about competition.
Right.
So then how do you grow with this, and what happens if you get a knock on the door?
Well, it's going to depend on what their issue is.
Right.
Is their issue that we have Lodian in our name? Is their issue that we are drinking while doing this podcast recapping?
Right.
As far as like Fair Use Act, we're not just watching the show on the podcast and people are going to be able to get this content, watch these shows for free. We're recapping. Mm-hmm. So for any clips we have that falls under the Fair Use Act, I mean, the only thing I would have with the Nickelodeon having an issue is just, hey, why aren't you working for us so we can make more money?
I'm so with you on that, because I do a lot of the interviews that I do are promoting different networks, NBC, Fox, and OWN, which is from Oprah Winfrey, and we go so in depth with the shows that they're promoting, but I don't make one red cent from that. What I like to do is I like to have conversations with actors, because they're creative people, and those that are listening learn how they too can step out of the closet and go become a greater at their craft.
Right. So I mean, I've tried to figure out what could be an issue with Nickelodeon, mm-hmm. and I have not found it.
Where I got in trouble, Ty, is it was with SoundCloud, and even though I was talking to the people that I was promoting that with the music, because I would fully promote it with the new album in the background and stuff like that, give it a real showmanship. Well, the people at SoundCloud go, no, you're breaking copyright laws. You should be paying a royalty. And I wrote to them and I said, but here's the thing, I'm talking to the people that recorded the music. And they still took me down. I lost everything on SoundCloud, and it was like so it changed the way that I podcast. It gets no music at all. What are you going to do with music?
So we have our own music. Mm-hmm. So my co-host is a fantastic musician, and I just happen to be really great at writing. So like I wrote our theme song, and he performed it. We write our own fake ads until we get our own real ads. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, as far as like music, it'd only be music if we were playing a clip. So like the beginning of a theme song or a clip of a show to make our point.
Will your fake ads also include, because you live in South Carolina, correct?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, so then would you go to some sort of liquor store and say, look, we'll give you a drop. We'll name our studio after you, but you've got to provide some of the whiskey.
I've reached out to some liquor reps. I've not had success yet. I think once we actually have a proof of concept where we're releasing these episodes, they're like, oh, you're actually serious and not just wanting free booze.
Well, you're right about that, because even on Podcrashing, I have an episode which is called Unlucky 7, where I always say that people make it to number 7 and then they drop. And that's one of the biggest challenges is that how far do we go into it? And I think that one of the things that happens, these people create seasons, and I'm going, why are you creating a season? Do you lose interest? What happens? Are you going to create a season, or are you going to do it as often as possible?
So I think the aspect of seasons follows along with television, in which case you're just having a series of episodes that are lumped together as season 1, and then the next. So we had that concept of our first season as 10 episodes. We are planning on having 7 recorded by the time we launch, so that way we have a pool of episodes to release in case something happens. I mean, I literally had a child get exposed to COVID, then bring it home, and then I got sick. And while he was fine, I was rushing. But we lost about a month of time. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to have this pool. So in case that happens, we're not just stopping. We would still have episodes to post every week. And that way we can just catch up when we need to. You're
playing a very smart game, and here's why. When it comes to conversations and interviews and stuff like that I do, I'm 3-4 pages deep with conversations that'll keep me ready to. If something should go wrong, I have 4 months of things, what's called in the can, as we call it in radio.
Oh, you are batching to the max, and I love it.
And you've got to be prepared, because the very second you disappear from the podcast scene, they're gone, and then it's like starting all over again.
Right. So we definitely wanted to have episodes in the can before we start releasing, just so that we have that safety net.
What I love talking with non-radio people who are podcasting, and the reason why is because I come from a world of formatics. I come from a world of program directors and consultants and stuff like that. And to see how you step out there as a true pioneer and to watch your show grow, I learned from people like you, because you take chances that a radio person would never do.
Well, with podcasts, we have that freedom to take those chances.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys cuss on the show? Because that's one of those big things that I don't do.
We do. So we do make it known in the beginning of the episode, hey, we're talking about shows that people in their 30s and 40s would have watched. So this is not for kids. So if you are a kid, you can kindly leave. Like, it's very much, we want to set the expectation of, hey, this is not kid friendly.
Right.
If you are a kid, if your parents are letting you watch this, cool. If they're not, kindly leave.
Yeah, I don't mind to hear the cussing and stuff like that, like a good Mark Maron show and stuff. I mean, because Mark knows where to put the words in the right place. He's not doing it to just do it. He's doing it because that's just Mark Maron for you.
Right. And I'm the same way, where I'm not just swearing just for the effect of swearing. It's just we're having a conversation, and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, and it comes out right there, and it's natural.
Yeah. One of my podcasts is called The Choice, and it's all about getting out there for the creative minds and spirits. And I've always wanted to have the confidence to just lay out some words and talk like I normally do, because I mean, in the real world, dude, I'm from Montana. We lived off that F-bomb.
It's definitely a good word to have, because it means so many different things. It means so many different things.
Where's your platform going to land? I mean, are you going to do Spreaker? Are you going to do Anchor.fm? Are you doing iTunes? Where are you going to land it?
That would be a question for my co-host, who is not with me right now. Mm-hmm. He actually had launched a podcast. He was working for a psychiatric firm. Ooh. And so he was running their podcast. And so he has a podcast host that he's wanting to use, and I'm totally trusting him on that because he's done it before. It's kind of a nice mix, because he's the technical side and I'm more the creative marketing.
You always have been. You've always been that way.
So it was a good match made.
Yeah. Well, here's what we got to do. We got to do episode after episode with the growth of this, because I want listeners to that want a podcast and stuff like that to follow your growth, to follow your strength and you know, the changes and the challenges that you go through.
I would love that. Let's do it.
Absolutely, man. All right, where can they go to find out more information? Have you built up that website yet, or where are they going to get it?
So it will be, the webpage will be made. You can follow us on Twitter at Whiskeylodeon. We have an email, whiskeylodeon.podcast@gmail.com. We will have a landing page. I'm pretty confident that whiskeylodeon.com is not taken.
Oh, geez. God, I never even thought about that. Boy, we better get that thing in your name then as quickly as possible, right?
Absolutely. So we got a graphic designer currently working on the logo, which is what I was waiting for before finishing up the rest of it. We will be launching the podcast on March 15th. We have a set date that we're starting. Okay, so then that's going to be your 7 episodes. When do you release them? Once a week? Yeah, once a week. So we'll probably release 2 just to have it there. And that will be my birthday present, being the 14th, but I guess it'll be a belated birthday present, but whatever. Okay, so before that date, we got to talk again. Because I want to have that experience with you as you guys get closer and closer to hear your excitement grow and all that kind of stuff. Because people don't understand that when you build a podcast, there's nervousness. There's also a ton of excitement. Oh, there's a ton of excitement because your ideas go everywhere. It's like, what can we do to help launch this? What can we do to make this the best? So like once we have our logo, we're building a landing page. We want to have business cards with the QR codes. That way we can get people just ready for that launch. So that way, as soon as it happens, we have viewers, not just, hey, we put it out there, but now we got to find people to listen. All right, man. I'm going to be knocking on your door the closer we get to that stage. Okay. All right. I'll bake some cookies. You be brilliant today. All right. All right. You too, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.